let's look at how you might want to change some colors up on this screensaver. And there's kind of two ways that you can do that. So here, again, I'm just back to my regular old circle. And, oops, this stuff's not supposed to be in there yet. And, I have purple and yellow. Well, one way you could do this, because you can't really, again, you can't really add or subtract colors. Although you can, and I can show you how to do that. But one way to think about it is a list. So instead of just having purple, we could make the colors say, well, let's do purple, green, and blue as our choices. And then again, you don't even have to do the outside, like the width color, but if you wanted to, maybe you could say that's going to be red, yellow, red, and orange. So just some basic color choices, as you can see. I'm going to, for simplicity's sake, I'm going to make these the same uh, values. I mean, like three of them and three of them, because I think that'll make things easier. So how do you do that? Well, down here, you can see I was experimenting, and I forgot to erase some of it. So instead of just saying look at color, I have to say look at color, and then it's a list, so look at color at position C. And so what's C going to be? So up here we say, well, C equals 0. Over here in the global area, we say that there's going to be a C that we use. And then down here, we're going to say C plus equals 1. The problem with a list is if you ever get beyond the number of choices you have, if it tries to do a fourth choice, it'll crash immediately. So when I run this, it crashes because it will say list out of range, which means it's too many. You're trying to read something in a list that doesn't exist. I was trying to read the fourth number. So we have to keep it from getting bigger than it needs to. So I can do like if C gets greater than 3. Now, actually, this is position 0, 1, and 2. So honestly, it would just be if C gets greater than 2, then C goes back to 0, so it starts at position 0. And that works. And so you can see it's just choosing orange, red, and yellow as my inside color, and my outside color is the blue, purple, and green. So again, I don't necessarily like that. Honestly, if I was going to do this, I would probably end up just using color 2 both times maybe, and just forgetting about the thickness, because that might look cooler. You can have some control over what colors come up, and you can choose cool different palettes to work with that you like the looks of together, or two balls that each have their own colors that look really nice when they're blended together, the two circles. One other quick thing, if you have more than 3 things here, obviously you would have more than that down here. You could say, you know what, find the length of C and subtract 1 from it, and don't let it get bigger than that, so that if I add more, I don't have to change this code. That's just saying how big is the list up here, and then because it's going to say 3, it's going to say, oh, there's 3 things in the list. I have to subtract 1, so it doesn't ever get bigger than 2. Again, because the computer counts from 0 to starting it from 0, so that gets a little confusing. So that's one way you can do it. Another way that you can do it, I'm just going to erase this. In fact, I'm going to make my color, I kind of have to give it a starting value, don't I? Give it a starting value of 0, which does mean I have to be careful. I have to fix a few things now. I don't need C anymore, and I don't need C down here anymore. And I'm going to use color 2 in color. And so right now there is no color, so I go to run it. Oh, that's kind of fun. So it still gives me something. But if I want to add color to it, and I'm doing it before I draw the circle for the first time, because I'm like, before I draw it for the first time, I should really have some color. So I'm going to say color equals make color. I'm going to make a special, function to make my colors for me. And color 2 are both going to be that. Then I go up here and I say, okay, let's have a definition of a function called make color. And what we're going to do is there's a way you can tell simple GUI, because again, this is kind of specific to what we're doing here in CodeSculptor. There's a way that you can say, I want a color that is called the RGB color. And if you've ever used Photoshop, you might know that every color on your screen is made up of some red, RBG. Let's try RGB. Some red. I did it again. Goodness. Greens and blues. And then there's a parentheses, and then it's like the amount of red, and the numbers you're allowed are from 0 to 255. So let's just say I want, 0 red, and I want 255 green, and I want 0 blue. So that's how you would make a green color. I don't know what, yeah, there we go. And since it's a hashtag, I just put that there. If we could tell it we want to have that color to equal color, then it would create green. So what I'm going to do, instead of giving a specific color, is I'm going to say, well, let's make a random number between 0 and 255. And then let's make green equal a random number between 0 and 255. And then let's make blue. And if you're doing this smart, you'll copy and paste, unlike me. Now what we can do is we can make a string, because our color needs to be a string. And so this is where we're going to get into putting together. What we have to do is take these values and put them into a format that looks like this. So RGB, make sure I do that correct. I think I was doing Ruth Bader Ginsburg, right? So Ruth Ginsburg Bader, RGB, and a parentheses. And then we're going to add to that, because we're concatenating a string together. We're going to add to that the string value of R plus a comma. So that's got to be in strings. Maybe it'll help if I put spaces between each of these things. So I've got RGB, and then whatever number it came up with here, then a comma for this comma, then the string of green, then another comma, and then the string of blue. And then finally a closing parentheses. So we've created a string that creates a color, and then I can return that string. And it's going to send it back into here, and color is going to become that color, whatever it is. So when I run this, it's randomly choosing these colors. And what you should see is like the colors range all over the place. So that's cool if you want random colors. If you're thinking to yourself, I don't really want random colors, I want colors I can control a little bit more, then that might be the first way. One other little thing you can do is maybe you say, well, I don't want any greens in it, so let's just change greens to zeros. So now it's going to be, some amount of red, some amount of blue, but never any green. And so then I get reds and blues. Sometimes blacks. Or of course you could change that and say, I don't want any blues, or I don't want any, any particular ones. Or you could say, hey, I only want from 0 to 100 red, so there's never a lot of red, it's just a little bit of red mixed in. Overall, you'll see the colors are kind of darker, but it's mostly greens and blues with a little bit of red every once in a while. Or one more, you could say, well, I always want a lot of green, right? So you could change this number. So you can, the variety that you can get in here is kind of astonishing, right? So now it's forcing it to be much green with some reds and some blues thrown in, and so we get kind of this green palette of a screensaver. And so that's all just by playing with these numbers and seeing what happens. Or you could make a big list of colors and kind of go to your web colors. Like, what if you wanted to go through all the various cyan colors? So you list all these colors. See, here's the RGBs for them, by the way. But you just say, I want, all these possible colors. And so you list them all the first way I showed you, and then maybe the outside of it is always a yellow or something like that. And so you can kind of go through palettes if you want to do it that way. Ooh, nice brown, nice warm brown palette. That might be pretty cool. So those are kind of some options for color that you could do.